Hi friends, it's Miss Kristin from the Grafton Public Library. Thank you for joining us for STEM for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. This week we're going to be creating your very own sidewalk chalk. Once it sets, you can use it to draw outside to your heart's content. The materials that we're going to need this week are some water. You're going to need a 1 cup measuring cup and a 3/4 cup measuring cup. I wouldn't use nice measuring cups. If you have some junky ones, I'd use those because when you make the chalk, a lot of the residue stays in the cups. So we've used these before to make chalk. I don't have a 3/4 cup one, but I do have a 1/4 cup one. So I'm just going to use that 3 times. You're going to need some plaster of Paris. You're going to need a silicone mold or an ice cube tray or something to put your chalk mixture in, because that will harden inside that silicone mold or ice cube tray or whatever container you'd like, and that will end up being the shape of your chalk. These silicone molds are great because they're really, really easy to peel off. So if you have some of these, I definitely recommend them. You're going to need a popsicle stick, some powder tempera paint. You can use liquid paint, but the powdered one just works a lot better. And you're going to need a container to mix your chalk in. I wouldn't recommend using a nice container. This is one, again, that we use outside for mixing things. Your chalk is going to leave a residue in here probably, and it's much better if you don't use something that you really care about. Before we start creating our chalk today, I wanted to explain to you a little bit about what chalk is actually made of. Chalk is made of something called gypsum. It's a soft sulfate mineral compound. It's widely mined and also used as a fertilizer, and it's also the main ingredient in many forms of plaster, drywall, and blackboard or sidewalk chalk. The fine-grained white or lightly tinted variety of gypsum is called alabaster, and that has actually been used for sculpture by many cultures, including ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient Rome, the Byzantine Empire, and the Nottingham alabasters of medieval England. Needless to say, alabaster has been around for a very long time. So today, since we're using plaster of Paris, you may be wondering what actually is plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris is created when that gypsum is heated to 302 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, the mineral gypsum partially dehydrates, with 75% of the water content escaping as water vapor. This is called an endothermic reaction. An endothermic reaction is any chemical reaction that absorbs heat from its environment. The absorbed energy provides the activation energy for the reaction to occur. A hallmark of this type of reaction is that it feels cold. So when you have an endothermic reaction, whatever you're creating is going to feel cold. When water is re-added to plaster of Paris, like we're going to do today, it resets itself as a gypsum crystal lattice and undergoes an exothermic reaction. This is the opposite of an endothermic reaction. So if an endothermic reaction creates something that feels cold, an exothermic reaction is going to be a chemical reaction that feels the opposite, or hot. It's a chemical reaction that releases energy through light or heat. So today, when we're making chalk, we are going to be creating heat. I'm going to say this a few times in this video, but when we're making the chalk and it's setting with the plaster of Paris, please be sure not to touch it because it will get incredibly hot. All right, before we actually get started, I just want to make a disclaimer that doing this activity outside is probably going to be your best bet. And whatever materials you use, please don't run and wash them in your kitchen sink or your bathroom sink. We're going to talk about how to safely clean your materials later. All right, our first step is to get our mixing bowl, and we're going to mix together 1 cup of plaster of Paris and 3/4 cup of water. So this is what your plaster of Paris should look like, almost like flour. It's that kind of off-white powder. So I'm going to get 1 cup, and it's okay if your measurements aren't exact. We're not baking, so this looks pretty good. So I'm going to put my 1 cup of plaster of Paris in here, and then I'm going to put in 3/4 cup of water. So that's 1/4 cup. That makes a 1/2 cup. and now 3/4 of a cup. And once I do that, now I can add in my powdered tempera paint. Again, feel free to mix colors. You can just do one color. It's completely up to you. All right, I have my powdered tempera paint. You can add in as much as you like. The more you add in, the more brightly colored your chalk will be. You don't have to go crazy. Try your first batch and see how it goes. And then you're gonna get a popsicle stick and you are going to stir, stir, stir. You wanna make sure that all of the tempera paint mixes in with that plaster of Paris and the water. And like I said before, when you're adding that water back into the plaster of Paris, the gypsum is going through that exothermic chemical reaction. So it's going to create heat. It's gonna take a little while. It's not gonna get hot right away. But I do want you to be aware that that will happen, that this mixture is going to get hot at some point in the near future. So please be careful. Now, if you want to mix colors, you can just add in a little bit of another color of tempera paint. So I popped in a little bit of blue. So if I mix the blue and the yellow together, we'll see if I come up with a green color. And if you want to leave it not fully mixed, you'll also get some really neat swirls of color in your chalk. So I think that's what I'm gonna try to do. I'm gonna make it look a little tie-dyed. So I'm gonna mix it up, but not completely. And then once it looks good to you, you're going to take your silicone molds and you're gonna pour your mixture into your silicone mold. Okay, you don't want to overflow it, so be careful. And once you make these, be careful when moving them because they're incredibly flimsy. So I'm going to fill up another mold. There's that one. I think I'm going to do a flower one next here. And we'll try a circle one. Oop, we already did a circle actually. Let's do a heart. And then you can use your popsicle stick to scrape out the rest of your chalk. There'll definitely still be some of your mixture left inside your container. And again, don't worry if you get this on your skin. It's not gonna hurt you. All right, so that looks pretty good. So I have 4 filled molds with my chalk mixture. So what you need to do now is let your chalk set. If you're outside or you're at a spot in your house where you can just leave these alone for a little while, then just do that. I can't leave these on my counter, so I brought in a container and I'm going to very carefully hold both sides of my silicone mold, because again, they're pretty flimsy, and place them inside my container here. Move this one. Ooh. All right, so there we go. I have my 4 molds in there. And if you feel the outside, you can tell they're not hot yet, okay? It takes a little while for the reaction to start, but it's going to happen. So now we're just gonna let these sit. The drying time will vary depending on how warm it is, how humid it is, and where you place the chalk to dry. But you'll definitely start to see the chalk will harden. Please be patient. If you try to peel your silicone mold or take your chalk out of whatever mold you have it in too early, what will happen is the middle of your chalk hasn't finished setting and hardening, and you'll end up with just broken pieces. So patience is key here. So now we're going to talk about cleanup. Remember how I said you don't want to run to your sink to rinse off all the materials that you've used today? Cleanup is really important because this stuff is going to harden in those molds and make chalk. If you put it down your pipes, the same thing is going to happen. So we have to do cleanup a little bit different. We're gonna take a container with our our plastic bags inside of it, just like this, and you're actually going to fill it with water and use it as a sink. Okay, I think I need a little bit more. There we go. And then we're gonna rinse everything out. You're gonna even wanna rinse your hands if you got the plaster on your hands. Again, you don't wanna be putting any plaster of Paris down the sink. So here's my measuring cup. If you wanna save your popsicle stick. So I'm gonna rinse these off really, really well. Okay. And you're gonna rinse all your materials off. And once you've rinsed all your materials off, you can just place them outside to dry. You can then bring them inside or bring them to your sink to wash them if you want to wash them with soap. But it's really important that after you take your things out, see how my water is really cloudy? That's because all the plaster of Paris is mixing in with the water. What's gonna happen is you're gonna let it sit for a little while. Same way you're gonna let your chalk sit. And all that plaster is actually gonna go to the bottom and the water is gonna rise to the top. Once that happens, you can actually pour the water off the top and it'll leave the plaster on the bottom undisturbed. Then you can just take your bag of plaster and throw it away. Hi friends, so our chalk has set. You can see it's hard. I actually let mine sit overnight, so now all I have to do is pull off these silicone molds and they just peel off super easy. And you can see that there is one of my chalk pieces. Again, these molds are great. There's a heart one. There's a flower. And a circle one. And now they're ready to go. You can see the swirls that I kind of made in here because I didn't totally mix my paint colors that I used, so they came out pretty neat looking. So now we can give them a try. I have a chalkboard right here. I think I'll try the star one. There we go, and I made a star. So you see they work just like a regular piece of chalk. And I look forward to seeing what designs you made. Please feel free to send us pictures. We'd love to see how your chalk came out. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help you. And I hope you had fun learning how to make your very own homemade chalk. See you next week.